think is the lowest hanging fruit in terms of what they're asking for? What do you think could actually get first of all, thank you done? It's on their agenda and what to do, and I appreciate you being here.
No, thank you. It wouldn't be any place else. I love South Carolina. It reminds me of
Well, as the former governor of Maryland, you are the closest thing you're going to have to a Southern on stage tonight. South Carolina has not voted for a Democratic candidate for president since Jimmy Carter in 1976. South Carolina has not had a Democratic governor in over a decade. No Democrats hold statewide office. Both houses of the legislature are Republican.
I think it's a
Your party, the Democratic Party, must be doing something
to for-profit prisons in our country. I think it's immoral. I think it's wrong. We are our best when we talk about where our country is going. The specters that we now have on the border of women and children being detained for months and months on end. I mean, look, contrary to Donald Trump's assertion, the enduring symbol of our country is not the barbed wire fence, it is the Statue of Liberty. So I in town service for 15 years. I ran for mayor of Baltimore in 1999. It was not because our city was doing well. We had become the most violent, addictive, abandoned city in America. We had open-air drug markets that had taken over whole sections of our city where the poorest neighbors of ours couldn't go out and decide with peace in any day of the week. But over those 15 years, I've been on a constant search for the things that actually go to save and redeem lives. We repealed the death penalty. We reduced our incarceration rate to 20-year lows. We reduced our recidivism rate to 15-year lows. I restored voting rights to 52,000 people. I decriminalized the possession of small amounts of marijuana. And we also put our city on the path for better days. I wasn't able to make her immune to setbacks as we saw in the aftermath of Freddie Gray's death. But we were able to save a lot of lives. And given the legacy of racism and slavery, and the way that it is intertwined with public safety, with law enforcement, and particularly with drug policies in our country, all of us have a responsibility to be on a constant search for the policies that actually
We're going to take a very quick break. We're going to come back and I'm going to talk with you about foreign policy and a few other things. But first, here's the stunt.
And in fact, we need to restore
I promise it won't hurt. Pick one. I don't know what's in each of the There's four here. Pick one. What this is, these guys, what are you? I won't hurt you.
Johnny Carson and the Swami thing.
All right. There we go. These are not policy questions. They are also not questions that will make you look or feel dumb. And I promise I will do it to the other candidates as well. Ready? If you had to catch your own food to survive, would you hunt or would you fish? High-speed rail coast to coast or manned mission to Mars?
Why is it I reject the premise of your question? I'm telling you, you can do both.
Was there a time in your life when you were a smoker? Make a big mistake.
No,
What is the last one? What is the most impractical item of clothing that you own? In terms of I'm so glad this question's for family.
No. But just
Why is that important?
I think it's important because I think leadership isn't about following rules. I think leadership's about being clear about your principles and bringing people together.
On the polls, she's not actually following the polls. I mean, the polling this year on Keystone, as recently as this year, showed that public support for building Keystone is still at 60% nationwide. Previous polls have showed that 85% of Americans thought building Keystone would create a significant number of jobs, which it would not. But the vast majority of the American public thinks that. So the polling actually isn't necessarily with the president, with you, and now with Secretary Clinton on this issue. And that's part of the political failure here. Why have Democrats failed to win the argument on this? Why have they failed to persuade the public, even though they've now got the policy where they want it?
I think we've made a big mistake as a party when we talk about climate change, where because we're the party that actually believes in science, We rush to connect the dots, but it draws us all in a straight line to hell. And the great American mystic Thomas Merton once said that any appeal that begins from a standpoint of despair is doomed to fail. So we need to wrap the challenge of climate change in the opportunity of more jobs. What am I talking about? In Iowa. In the state of Iowa, 15 years ago, you'd hardly...
He still thinks he has a chance,
find a windmill. Today, 30% of their energy comes from clean Iowa wind. It employs 4,000. We square our shoulders to the great challenges and we make them our opportunity. And that's how we need to wrap this in order to win this next general election.
There are people who are going to lose their jobs, though, and there are whole states that are going to have their economies, if not hurt, then at least dramatically changed if we make a really radical switch toward renewable fuels. You're right that there is opportunity. We're here with Louisiana Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. Thank you very much for indulging me on my quick questions. This next question, we asked viewers to send us questions to ask either by Facebook or Twitter or email. This one came in on Facebook from Michael Herm. The question is this: with war in the Middle East ramping up, one, should the draft be reinstated so that less than 1% of the population is no longer fighting for the rest of us? And number two, should there be a war tax to help pay for it? Michael says it has become too easy to wage war since such a small percentage of Americans have skin in the game.
Great idea. Interesting ideas. I would disagree with Michael on the first one, but I would agree with him on the second one.
So no draft.
So look, I think that none of us fully appreciate the degree to which well, I shouldn't say that. Not enough of us appreciate the degree to which we have put the burden of these last 15 years of conflict on the back of such a small numbers of our people. But I do believe this lead to probably one of the greatest blunders in modern American history was the way that George W. Bush, under false pretenses, led our army into war in Iraq. And he didn't even have the nerve to ask us to pay for it. And now I hear all of these Republicans walking about the debt. Well, you know what? The reason we have a debt is because George Bush falsely led us into war and didn't even ask us to pay for it. That's why we have a big debt. So I do think there needs to be some more truth in what it means to be an American citizen. Look, the most weighty decision any president ever has is to send troops into combat. And Rachel, my Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown and I made it a point to go to every funeral in Maryland of families who has to pay a lot more than a few cents, in their taxes.
So you don't believe there should be a draft?
I don't believe there should be a draft, but I do believe we need to do a much better job of telling people the cost of the quick and almost reflexive default reach for the military option every time. That does our soldiers a disservice. If we're not smart enough to identify threats before they rise and take actions to reduce them, shame on us. And we shouldn't send them into wars we're not willing to pay for.
Let me ask in terms of a national security issue that looks like it may be a legacy issue for the next president. If President Obama cannot close Guantanamo by the time he leaves office, do you have a plan for how you could do it as the next president, even though he has not been able to get it done so far?
I believe that, in talking to a lot of military leaders, they tell me that the two biggest recruitment tools for Al-Qaeda are now ISIL, our American boots on the ground in the Middle East, and our continued operation of Guantanamo. The president understands this. The president has taken great strides to reduce the population there, and
Congress has blocked him.
Well, Congress has blocked him, and we need to call it out in the course of this election. And I think that we need to do a better job as a party, frankly, of putting our military voices forward to say that this is wrong. It's not good for our troops that we continue to operate Guantanamo. We are a nation of laws. For us to maintain internment camps and to keep people interned indefinitely is contrary to our principles as a people. And we're the best in the world when we operate according to our principles.
I'm going to ask you a down and dirty politics question. So forgive me in advance.